Hey everybody, this is a shorter piece by Jan Hoff, who wrote a book called Marx Worldwide on the development of the international discourse on Marx since 1965. It's a very good book. I highly recommend it. Haymarket put it out, so if you want to go support independent radical publishing, you should buy that book. Or steal it from the internet. But either way, you should check out his work. Where am I? Okay, yeah, it's called Marx in Germany. In 2008 to 2009, the student organization of Die Linke, the left, the Sozialistisch-Demokratischer Studierendenverband, SDS, Socialist Democratic Students League, launched a nationwide campaign for starting Capital reading groups. In recent years, there were some media reports that sales of Capital Volume 1 surged because of the current economic crisis, rising from several hundred in 2007 to a few thousand in 2008. This comes on top of a long tradition of high-quality research in Germany on Marx's critique of political economy. The theoretical underpinnings of recent German Marx research have been closely examined by Ingo Elba. I have an essay or two by Ingo Elba on this channel, so if you'd like to listen to that, you should. And have been put in the context of global Marx research by Jan Hoff, referencing himself here. A core topic of the German debate on capital is value theory, especially an interpretation called monetäre Werttheorie, monetary theory of value. Many German Marx researchers agree that Marx's theory of value can be understood as a critique of pre-monetary theories of value. Accordingly, they assume that there is a necessary and specific interconnection between Marx's concept of value, his definition of abstract labor, and his theory of money. Examples of the monetäre Werttheorie reading of Marx can be traced back to the 1970s, but this interpretation also prevails in more recent studies. Among the younger generation of scholars, this understanding of the Marxian theory of value is hardly contested. The various interpretations of Marx's theory of value that were launched by researchers such as Hans-Georg Backhaus and Helmut Reichelt in the 1960s and 1970s, or by Michael Heinrich in the 1990s, formed the starting point for the younger scholars' approach to Marx. The link between the categories of value, commodity, and money is relevant to the interpretation of Marx's theory of commodity money. During the 1990s, Heinrich had put forward a critical view of Marx's theory of money as a commodity. Ingo Stutzler, a disciple of Heinrich, has more recently drawn attention to this problem. According to Stutzler, Marx clearly views money as a commodity in his critique of political economy. Marx states in Capital, quote, "We have seen that the money form is merely the reflection thrown upon one single commodity by relations between all the other commodities. That money is a commodity is therefore only a discovery for those who proceed from its finished shape to analyze it afterwards. The process of exchange gives to the commodity, which it has converted into money, not its value, but its specific value form." End quote. The monetäre Werttheorie reading of the relation between value and money is supported by Stutzler, who argues that Marx's theory of commodity money clashes with the empirical reality of present-day capitalism on the grounds that, with the imposition of the Bretton Woods system and its fixed exchange rates, money ceased to be a commodity. Stutzler finally pleads for a deeper understanding of Marx's method in order to cope with these problems. The discussion on the problem of commodity money was afterwards again taken up in a book by Dieter Wolf, Stefan Kruger, Ansgar Thnola Grotusen, and who defend Marx's theory of commodity money against Heinrich and Stützle. An important aspect of the German debate in both its Western and its Eastern versions has been the close philological examination of Marxian texts. In this case, the Mega 2, the second edition of the Marx-Engels Gesamtausgabe, complete writings, is of special relevance as it includes Marx's excerpts, notes, and marginal notes which enable us to reconstruct the complete development of his political economy. For instance, the current German debate on value theory takes into account not only the theoretical distinctions between the different versions of Chapter 1 of Capital 1, but also a text titled Ergänzungen und Veränderungen zum ersten Band des Kapital, supplements and revisions to the first volume of Capital. Marx wrote this text in 1871-72 as a basis for the reworking of his value theory and especially his value form analysis for the second German edition of Capital. This essential Marxian text can be read as an insightful and self-clarifying commentary on his own theory of value. It was first published in German in 1987 and still not translated into English. Publication of the Marx-Engels Werke MEW edition has also been resumed, at least partly due to the recent growth of interest in Marx and Marxism. Moreover, some single editions of Marx's writings have also sold well. The most important journals of Marx studies in Germany, Beiträge zur Marx-Engels-Forschung, Neue Folge, and Marx-Engels-Jahrbuch, serve as discussion forums mainly for Mega 2 related research. The articles in both journals encompass such topics as the Marx-Engels relation, the category of, quote, capital in general, end quote, the theory of the falling rate of profit, the, quote, beginning, end quote, of Marx's dialectical presentation, and Marx's reception of his sources. The most recent trend of Marx research in Germany focuses on the reception of Marx's theory since the 1960s. Ingo Elba explains how Marx was referred to in West German debates on the critique of political economy, especially regarding Marx's value theory and his conception of the object, on state theory, and on the theory of revolution. According to Elba, three major tendencies can be distinguished in the reception and discussion of Marx's theory. First is, quote, traditional Marxism, which Elba specifically criticizes. This trend turned Marx's thought into a Weltanschauung and a theory of the evolution of nature and society. A second trend, Western Marxism, originated with Lukács and Korsch in the 1920s. Western Marxism is characterized by Elba as a critical revolutionary theory of social praxis. The third trend is the West German Neue Marx-Lektüre, new reading of Marx that emerged in the 1960s and 1970s and which is still predominant today among West German Marx scholars. According to Elba, this trend is characterized by the questions it raises regarding Marx's critique of political economy. It turns to Marx's theory of economic forms, his theory of fetishism and mystification. It therefore focuses on Marx's theory of the forms that represent abstract labor and on those critical dimensions of Marx's thought that point to epistemological questions. It takes Marx's method of exposition into account and examines how the various economic forms are interconnected within the totality of economic categories. This new reading of Marx identifies his approach as a distinctive and unique theory differing in its method, object, and epistemology both from pre-Marxian classical political economy and from, quote, modern post-Marxian economics. During the 1960s, Michael Heinrich published a major study of Marx's relation to classical political economy. He argued that Marx had underestimated the theoretical gap between himself and the classics because Marx did not recognize that his critique of political economy was located on a different, quote, theoretical field, end quote, which went beyond the classics not only in its theoretical insights but also in its underlying premises. Astonishingly, Heinrich's thesis on Marx's relation to the classics was either neglected by most of his colleagues or instantly accepted as an axiom by his disciples, but has never been put to the serious, intensive discussion it deserves. Another book by Heinrich seeks to introduce the critique of political economy to young readers. The introduction to 3 volumes of Capital is recorded on this YouTube channel, so you should check that out. It is written from the standpoint of the, quote, Neue Marx-Lektüre. Like Elba and others, Heinrich sharply distinguishes Marxist theory from traditionalist, quote, Weltanschauungs Marxism. A more recent monograph by Heinrich comments on the beginning of Capital Volume 1, focusing on the paradoxical character of Marx's 1967 value form analysis and drawing on the self-clarification manuscript mentioned above. Another new reading of Marx, especially of Capital 1, has been put forward by the philosopher Christian Eiber. Despite his role as one of Germany's best-known Hegel experts, Eiber does not interpret Capital from the standpoint of Hegel Marxismus, Hegelian Marxism, manifested in the works of Hans-Jürgen Krahl and others. For Eiber, the Marxian project consists of the critique of the whole field of political economy. The theoretical background he shares with Heinrich and many other German researchers is shaped by the idea of a fundamental distinction between Marx and Marxism, between viewing Marx as a scientist and philosopher and viewing him as a founder of the Marxist Weltanschauung, or worldview, if you don't know what that means. Maybe they already said that, I don't know, but maybe I'm assuming that people know what it means. It means Welten, worldview. I've heard Heinrich refer to it as a worldly religion. Helmut Reichelt, who belonged to the first generation of the, quote, Neue Marx-Lektüre, a product of the student revolt of the 1960s, was a disciple of Horkheimer and Adorno. In a recent book, he has summarized his research of the last decades. In his view, the initial aim of the Neue Marx-Lektüre was to reconstruct Marxian method. The main topic of Reichelt's more recent work was the problem of the specific, quote, objectivity of value, which has to be considered in the light of a peculiar theory of, quote, validity. Other authors have contributed to the interpretation of the Marxian critique of political economy. Dieter Wolff, who was highly critical of Reichelt's theory of, quote, validity, has examined the problem of contradiction within dialectics. Nadja Rakowitz has criticized Engels' reading of the beginning of Capital, as has Christopher Arthur in the English-speaking debate. Gerhard Stapelfeld has underlined the differences between Marx and the classical political economists. Both Wolfgang Fritz Haug and Michael Berger have offered introductions to Capital. Sven Elmer's book represents a new interpretation of Marx's theory of class. Doesn't look like any of these are translated into English. Some young Marx interpreters address political questions in a rather indirect way by pointing to Marx's critique of certain forms of socialist theory and practice. In a recent monograph, Hendrik Wallat points out that Marx aimed at criticizing certain anti-individualist traits of 19th century socialism. The author of the Critique of Political Economy rejected both atatism and anarchism. Finally, Marx criticized the unconscious, quote, socialist perpetuation of certain forms and principles attached to bourgeois society. So Wallat also addresses some features of a socialist society, according to Marx, even though he avoids focusing primarily on present-day political movements. The Berlin historian Wolfgang Wippermann has recently studied the history of Marxist thought. Give me 1 second here. Wolfgang Wippermann. Oh, looks like he also attacks anti-Semitism, or well, obviously everyone attacks anti-Semitism, but critiques, sorry, I just looked him up. And the first video that comes up on YouTube says, Professor Wolfgang Wippermann, Anti-Semitism and Racism in German Textbooks, 1919 to 1945. And that's from Yad Vashem. Anyway, Berlin historian Wolfgang Wippermann has recently studied the history of Marxist thought. Wippermann puts forward the idea of Karl Marx's, quote, 4 lives. Marx's first life was his actual lifetime, which was mainly shaped by his intensive work on capital and by his activity as a political revolutionary. After his death in 1883, his ideas continued to exist as a kind of, quote, second life, because they were taken up and partly modified by the working class movement of both the Second and Third Internationals. This development is seen by Wippermann in a specifically critical light, i.e. as a deformation of Marx's original theory. However, Marx also led a third life within the theoretical approaches of, quote, dissident, end quote, Marxist theorists such as Korsch, Lukács, and Gramsci. In Wippermann's opinion, the more recent renaissance of Marxist theories could represent a, quote, fourth life, because Marx deserves to be read again in the present, not only as an economist, but also as a philosopher and a historian. Wippermann stresses the role of Marx's idea within the recent discussions on globalization, but he also points to the relevance of Marx's views on topics such as Bonapartism, Asiatic despotism, or critique of religion. All in all, it is clear that the recent German debate on Marx, and especially on Marx's Capital, has both strengths and weaknesses. However, it might be inappropriate to speak of a, quote, Marx Renaissance, inasmuch as Marx's writings have always been studied seriously. Within this tradition of German Marx research, the younger scholars offer a perspective for the future. I hope that German discussions on Marx will be more thoroughly incorporated in the international Marx debate.